Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. To my respected lecturer, Dr. Mazni, and to everyone who is watching this video, today I'm going to present about my analysis of contents of the world news sections of the channel News Asia's news portals. My name is Marfid Bezukapi. The first, this study four objectives, which are number one, to analyze the differences or similarities between the first study and the second study. Number two, to determine the main of the category of news published by the CNA news agency. Number three, to investigate the news slants of the online newspaper. And number four, to determine the main agency used as the source for new CNA news agencies. From the from from the table, uh, based on the table, the most frequently appearing news in the first study CNA World News section are number one, Israel-Gaza war, with the highest frequency at 39%, international relations 18%, and several other categories such as natural disasters, conflict or war, US politics, and terrorist attacks at 7%. Finding from the second study of news categories showed that Israel-Gaza war still the relevant um, the prevalence news category with 29%, international relations 24%, and politics at 13%. From the report 1 and 2, um, uh, in comparison, in report 1, uh, consistent focus. CNA Singapore places significant emphasis on the Israel-Gaza conflicts. Also, and also they also emphasize on the international relations, highlighting ongoing conflicts with significant global implication. On the other hand, report number 2 continued emphasis, consistent focus on the Israel-Gaza war, which was those slightly reduced from the first study. Next, increase in attentions to international relations. This reflects a growing interest in international diplomatic affairs. Also, emergence of politics. This increase focus on the political news, suggesting a shift in editorial priorities. Next, news slants portrayed by the CNA's World News sections are of the first study. Number one, negative accounting for almost 60%. Second, positive recorded at 4%. And the neutrality of the news slants covered by the agencies was recorded at around 38%. For the second report, neutrality accounting for 73%. Negative news comprises a significant 21%, and positive news is minimal at just 6%. In comparison, for the first reports, negative news slants. In the first reports, nearly 60% of news reportings had a negative slant. This was largely due to the focus on events with inherently negative implications such as conflict or war, and terrorist attacks. The Israel-Gaza war was prominently featured, and the nature of these conflicts, with its violence and humanitarian crisis, naturally led to a higher volume of negative coverage. For example, a large number of casualties in Gaza involves women and children instead of soldiers. Uh, also, apart from that, Netanyahu ignores international pressures. Also, Hamas attacks on October 7th towards Israel was repeatedly mentioned as the starter points of the war. Meanwhile, for positive news slants, or for report 1, only 4% of the news had a positive slant in these periods. This small percentage likely included stories on humanitarian aid efforts or diplomatic initiatives aimed at resolving conflicts. The limited positive coverage have been showed by the dominant negative events occurring at the time, such as escalations of violence in the Israel-Gaza conflict. Positive news, while present, did not garner as much attention because it did not align with the more immediate and urgent nature of the prevailing negative events. Uh, Next, for neutral news slants, around 38% of the news had a neutral stance. This likely included coverage of routines, international relations, and diplomatic activities that did not have a clear positive or negative outcome. Neutral reporting reflects a balanced approach to journalism, where facts are presented without an apparent bias. In this period, despite the prevalence of negative events, CNA maintained a significant portions of neutral reporting, likely to provide a comprehensive view of ongoing global affairs. On the other hand, for report 2 of news slants, neutral news slant counted around 38% of the news had a neutral slant. This likely included coverage of routine international relations and diplomatic activities that did not have a clear positive or negative outcome. Neutral reporting reflects a balanced approach to journalism where facts are presented without an apparent bias. In this period, despite the prevalence of negative events, CNA maintained a significant portion of neutral reporting, likely to provide comprehensive views of ongoing global affairs. Again, it is the same pattern from the report one. Uh, Next, the negative news slants for the report 2. The negative slants decreased to 21%, indicating a reduction in the focus on purely negative events. However, ongoing conflicts such as the Israel-Gaza war continues to receive coverage due to their significant global impacts. While the negative coverage persisted, the reduction suggests that CNA balanced its reportings by including a wider variety of topics, reducing the overall negativity in its news outputs. For the positive news slant, the positive slant slightly increased to 6%. This included coverage of successful diplomatic efforts to or international cooperation initiatives. For instance, positive developments in peace talks or successful international collaborations would be highlighted. The increase in positive reporting reflects a more balanced approach to news coverage, ensuring that viewers are also informed about constructive and optimistic developments in global affairs. Next, for the news source, the news source of the CNA World News for the section for the first study is news outputs by CNA News Agency counted at 10%, while news produced by the other agencies uh, counted at 90%. For the news agencies of the first study, news coverage from Reuters uh, accounting for 61%, news coverage from AFP with 21%, news output by CNA journalists 10%. Next, for the second study of news source, others sources counted at 84%, CNA's own agencies accounting 16%. For the sources of news for the second study, other sources accounting for 84%, Reuters with 56%, AFP 14%, general agencies 6%, AP 3%, Bloomberg's 1%, miscellaneous sources 4%, CNA's own agencies with 16%. In comparison, for the report 1, the study of the data from the two monitoring period has shown that CNA news agency depends a lot on external news resources for the world news sections that are published on website. This can be observed in the first study, where up to nearly 90% of the news comes entirely from other news agencies. And in the second monitoring, where 86% of the news is also entirely from other sources. On the other hand, it is true that the news agencies benefit from having access to trustworthy and hard to find news from these outside sources, which helps with publication costs. The agency also may utilize news from that comes directly from text feeds or video uploaded by individuals. However, since the news is sourced from foreign sources, it may introduce foreign beliefs to the local readers in a certain area or country. Therefore, such journalism practices may have an influence on the degree of bias in the news. In conclusion, this study successfully achieves its objectives. The comparisons between the first study and the second study reveals clear differences and similarities in the categories of news, with a consistent focus on the Israel-Gaza conflict, a war, and a notable shift towards international relations and political news. The investigations into news slants show a significant decrease in negative news from 60% to 21%, an increase in positive news from 4% to 6%, and a stable proportion of neutral news at 38%. Additionally, the study confirms that the CNA news agency heavily relies on external sources for its world news, with 90% and 86% of the news coming from other agencies in the respective periods. These findings collectively demonstrate that the study meets its objective of analyzing differences, determining the main news category, investigating news sources, and identifying the primary agency used by CNA news agency. That's all for me. Thank you for listening.